Everyone. Today is Monday, March 11th, and the public safety meeting is now called to order. We begin to acknowledge that the land on which we gather and that is currently known as the city of West Hollywood is the occupied, unceded, seized territory of the Gabrielino Tongva and Gabrielino Kritz people. And now for the Pledge of Allegiance, Commissioner Harrison. If it won't, we have a floating flag. We never know where it is. Commission Secretary, can I please get a roll call?
Commissioner Blau?
Aye.
Commissioner Ramian?
Aye.
Commissioner Harrison?
Aye.
Commissioner Nickel?
Here.
Vice Chair Saltzman?
Here.
Chair Hallman?
Here.
We have a quorum.
And just so everyone knows, Commissioner Freiberg will not be with us this evening. Approval of the agenda. Item number 4 is the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes for tonight's agenda for Monday, March 11th? No. Can I get a motion for approval, please?
I move approval of the agenda.
And can I get a second?
Second.
Great, thank you. Commission Secretary, can I please get a roll call?
Commissioner Blau?
Aye.
Commissioner Ramian?
Aye.
Commissioner Harrison?
Aye.
Commissioner Nickel?
Aye.
Vice Chair Saltzman?
Aye.
Chair Hallman?
Aye.
The agenda is approved.
Great, thank you. Item number 5, on the approval of the minutes from our February 12th meeting. Are there any changes to the minutes?
Yes, Chair, I'd like to actually offer to the Commission that on page 4 of the attached minutes, 4th paragraph, comments made by our Vice Chair Saltzman would be amended to include specifically requesting information regarding the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department Audit and Accountability Bureau, statistics and compliance policies related to body-worn cameras. And then in addition to that, also adding requests and information from Vice Chair, from the Sheriff's Department representatives to report back on any sort of information related to the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department website as it relates to the State Racial and Identity Profiling Act, and specifically the dashboard displaying stop data separately as it relates to West Hollywood. And so we will be making some amendments, but I'd like to offer those changes.
Great, thank you, Director Rivas. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
Move approve the.
And can I get a second?
Second.
Great, thank you. Commission Secretary, can I please get a roll call?
Commissioner Blau?
Aye.
Commissioner Ramian?
Aye.
Commissioner Harrison?
Aye.
Commissioner Nickel?
Aye.
Vice Chair Saltzman?
Aye.
Chair Hallman?
Aye.
The minutes are approved.
Great, thank you, Commission Secretary. Item 6, public comments. And before we go to the general public, I'm happy to say that Mayor Erickson is with us this evening, and he's going to speak.
Hello, Public Safety Commission. I wanted to stop by today because I'm going to all the boards and commission meetings and saying hello as I've taken on the mayorship role. But I also wanted to come by and say I was really sorry I couldn't be at the public safety celebration and awards luncheon last week. You know, working for Planned Parenthood has its privileges, but also last minute calls when you get called to DC to go to the State of the Union because the president asked to make sure that people who provide reproductive health care were there on such an important speech. So when they call, you answer, and although the 48-hour trip across the country and back wasn't in the books as of Monday, it certainly happened, but I just wanted to come and thank all of you for showing such grace. I got getting text messages the whole time about how great it was. I also want to thank our sheriff's personnel and our fire department and our block by block and all the volunteers. that were recognized. You know, when I put forward the event, I think a year ago, I had been speaking with the mayor of Lomita, and they really thought it was they did a spaghetti dinner, by the way. We didn't do a spaghetti dinner, but you know, I'm open to that next year. But they really saw the way in which it helped communities come together and really honor and uplift those that really come to our aid when we need it the most. And so I thought it was a great idea, and I'm really glad my colleagues supported it. I'm really glad you all were able to be there, and I just love seeing all the photos, and I just want to give a special shout out to Danny as well for helping arrange everything. I know when I sent him that text at 11 saying, hey, I know we just talked about the event, I'm not coming anymore, so sorry about that. That wasn't in your plan, but thank you all again for serving our community so well, and I just wanted to make sure you knew how appreciative I was for each and every one of you. And that's it. Thank you very much, Chair Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Erickson. Commission Secretary, do we have any public comments in chambers tonight, and do we have any on Zoom?
We have no Zoom callers, but we do have some in chambers tonight. First speaker is Mikey Friedman. If you want to approach the podium, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good evening, Can you hear me? Good evening, Commissioners. Mikey Friedman, West Hollywood. I heard you loud and clear last month, Commissioner Aramian. You were right when you said it was terrible that no one from the public was present to weigh in on such an important decision. So here I am. Some of you may have heard me say this before, but I want to say it again just in case. If you had serious health issues necessitating cutting-edge treatments and the best doctors, would you want an HMO, or would you want the best possible insurance that you could afford? I know which one I would choose, and it wouldn't be the HMO. Looking at two gentlemen who are normally here, the sheriff and the block by block guy, and I don't see them, they're usually both here for our safety. However, who did Seppi and John Erickson want when they felt threatened and their safety was in danger? They both wanted the sheriff. Seppi called the bomb squad, and yet, what if there weren't enough sheriffs to help? Block by Block is a very nice escort service. And while service employees are supposed to be nice, they really aren't too much more than that. They are the HMO of the safety business. So, our sheriffs or Block by Block, those are our choices for our safety. And while it doesn't hurt to have an escort service, we need to choose to increase the better one, our sheriffs, who are armed, trained, and able to fight crime, and often whose presence alone on the streets act as a deterrent. We have the money, don't we, Danny? In fact, the city bragged that they have a huge surplus. Shouldn't they be spending it on giving us WehoAns the best protection, which is more sheriffs? Haven't we learned anything from the last Public Safety Commission and the Nika Soon Xiong's folly? So go ahead and show us that empirical evidence. Look for those key performance indicators. Say it isn't enough to feel unsafe, but in the meantime, give us a fully staffed sheriff's department so that they will be there for us when we need them, just like they were there for Seppi and John. And I hope that none of us ever find themselves in an unsafe situation or settle for less or takes being safe for granted. Thank you. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mikey. Next speaker is Steve Martin. If you want to approach the podium, you'll have 3 minutes.
Steve Martin, West Hollywood. And it was great seeing Mayor Erickson here tonight. I guess I want to thank Vice Chair Salzman. That was a rather impressive list of requests that you put forward. I think are very relevant and it'll be very helpful. And frankly, I want to know the answers too. That's great. But it does lead me to, are you guys getting regular reports from the county commission? It was kind of disturbing the other day. I guess it was Under Sheriff Miyake, and I'm sorry I butchered the name, just had his caveman tattoo removed before he came and testified before the county commission. You know, I mean, I understand we all have concerns about sheriff's gangs, I'm not too concerned about them in West Hollywood, and we're very fortunate for that. But we do need to make sure that we're plugged in, and maybe you guys would have a liaison with the county commission or get regular reports of their minutes, just because we should be in a sort of a symbiotic relationship with them, because there's no sense in us reinventing the wheel. And also, you guys probably have lots of good ideas to promote to them. The other issue is, I don't know if I missed something, but are the sheriff's vehicles not going to include the West Hollywood logo anymore? I didn't see the rainbow logo, the city logo on, like, I've seen 5, 6 sheriff's cars in the last 2 days, and none of them have the logo. So I didn't know if I missed something, but perhaps one of the commissioners can make an inquiry. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Last speaker is Nick Roybal. If you want to approach the podium, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
As I shared when, first of all, I apologize. Good evening, commissioners, Chair Holman. As I was walking over here, I almost got hit by a car. And that, as I shared with certain people, that kind of, obviously, that will frazzle you. And in that reflection, pedestrian safety, right? I immediately go to that. Pedestrian safety. Okay, Nicholas, so you almost get hit by a car. Well, what happened? And I start reflecting, and then I go to the last council meeting when Mayor Erickson spoke to that very situation, right? With cars, 5 cars and a Metro bus making a left after the signal had already turned on where I crossed, right over here. So I start reflecting on pedestrian safety. Then I begin reflecting upon our citizens in our city who speak about impediments to that, whether that be a scooter, whether that be a robot, whether that be non-enforcement of actual laws that are on the book. And I think, how can we as a commission, Chair Holman, how can we as commissioners, how can we as citizens re-center pedestrian safety? I think it matters. I think it's important. And this is what comes to my mind as I almost get hit by a car walking here. So I just had to say that. Literally, that took away from what I wanted to say, but I was hoping to kind of put that into some kind of coherent, cohesive language for each of you. That say, I always begin my remarks by thanking our sheriffs, by thanking our safety peoples, plural, women, men, and people who swear an oath, take a duty to defend freedom and democracy and our bodies and our community and our businesses. You know, Mayor Erickson went to the State of the Union. If anyone watched it, President Biden spoke about expanding freedom. Freedom is not taking away safety. Freedom is understanding that every block in this 1.9 mile of a city has a different idea, may have a different need for order, for consequence, for enforcement. But we should not take away safety, and we should not take away freedom. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. That is all for the public comment session.
Great, thank you, Commission Secretary. Our next item, item 7 is 7A, unfinished business. We're going to move that item, correct, Director Rivas?
Yes, Chair. You know, sorry, I should have asked the commission to approve that as a part of adopting the agenda. But if it's the will of the commission now to move that item after our Los Angeles County monthly reports and get into the monthly report from our Los Angeles County Fire Department. And then I was just informed that our general manager from Block by Block is unable to attend. There was an event that just occurred that she had to leave the office. And so there will not be, unfortunately, a report from Block by Block as a representative on that item. I'm happy to go over the information, though, and place it up on the screen and go over it as much as possible, but there won't be any of the detail or information that Erica Leon, our general manager, typically provides. But so if that's the will of the commission to kind of have Los Angeles County Fire Department do their monthly report, we can get into the Sheriff's Department report, and then right after we can get into the contract item, if that makes sense.
Okay, commissioners? Okay, thank you, Director Rivas.
Sure.
Chair, sorry to interrupt. If possible, can we add one more public comment?
Of course, yes,
Okay.
thank you.
So calling up Alan Strasberg, if you want to approach the podium.
Alan Strasberg, West Hollywood resident. And I want to thank Nick Roybal for his always on-point discussion, particularly on centering pedestrian safety, and that we really need to focus on that. I have many times said that public safety is the most important function of sound municipal governance, and I repeat that here. Our feelings about how safe we are similar to our feelings of physical pain. Neither has an objective measure. When one is in a medical setting, a professional relies on our feelings to tell them our level of pain. There's no blood test, no physical examination, no imaging procedure that will tell a healing professional our level of pain. Our experiences and feelings of public safety are similarly subject to our senses and individual lived experiences, triggers, and comfort level with the policy-making decisions that form our public safety shield. The statistics employed by those with an ideological agenda are a dangerous deceit foisted upon the people. And like the medical experience of pain, no healthcare provider will deceive us into thinking there's an absence of pain or that there's more pain than actually exists. Taking this medical turn of phrase one step further, I take a daily baby aspirin to prevent heart attack, and so far it has worked. Tinkering with public safety as a reactionary exercise whenever cherry-picked numbers go up or down is akin to ceasing my daily aspirin when I wake up and don't have a heart attack. Let's use common sense, long-term, big-picture thinking and stop using West Hollywood as the world's petri dish.
Thank you. Commission Secretary, are there any other public comments?
There's no more public comments.
Okay, great, thank you. So moving on to new business will be our monthly report from the Los Angeles County Fire Department.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. Zach Cates, LA County Fire Department Battalion Chief for West Hollywood. You will have me until the end of the month, and then I'm going somewhere else. This will be my last time with you guys, so thank you. For the month of February, LA County Fire Department responded to 569 calls for service. Of those 569 calls, 384 were medical type calls. Of those 384 medical type calls, 294 were transported to the hospital. The three most popular call types after the medical calls were of medical calls was person sick, unconscious, and major injuries. Of the remaining 185 calls that we serviced West Hollywood with were hazardous conditions, fires, and good intent calls. Majority of the fires were outdoor fires, trash fires, and cooking fires. Also, due to the residents using more heating and air conditioning due to a month of being cold and rainy, we also experienced numerous CO alarms, gas leaks, and electrical issues within residents. That's all I have. Does anybody have any questions?
Commissioners, any questions? Yes.
Thank you, Chair Hallman. Thanks for being here. Thanks for your report. I did have one question. It was brought up in the last city council meeting. There was mention of a delivery robot blocking a fire truck, that the delivery robot could not recognize the siren. Is this an issue you're aware of? Is it a larger issue? Have you ever heard of this?
First time I'm hearing about it.
Okay.
I'm not 100% aware of what those robots recognize other than people in cars. Obviously, we see them inhibit the streets of West Hollywood quite a bit. So I can't imagine that if it's only the robot, that would impede the traffic of a fire engine or one of our squads, because they do have the ability to go around it in other places too. But I have seen those things get stuck, you know, because they don't know what to do, so they stay put. So if there's pedestrians with them, that may be the problem as well. And we all know on the weekends and stuff like that, it gets pretty busy, so that we get slowed down anyways on the weekends just because of foot traffic and stuff. So it probably just makes it worse.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioners, any other questions? Commission Secretary, do we have any public comments on this item?
We don't have any public comments on this item.
Okay, thank you. Well, that was easy.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Director Rivas, do you want to give us a block-by-block update before we move to the sheriffs?
I'm happy to, or we
As
can
best you
obviously
can.
Sure, and I'm gonna base it off of 100% the statistics and the data. As I mentioned, I certainly will not be capable of providing any sort of in-depth analysis or highlights like our general manager Erica Leon typically does. So if you bear with me for just a minute as I get and pull up the report, and I'll also put it on the screen. That way community members as well as the commission will be able to view that. So just give me a quick second here. There we go. All right. And so up on the screen is data that we typically provide, that our security ambassador program typically provides, that shows a comparison from this year, February, which was last month, in comparison to February of 2023. So we are obviously seeing the bars in red that reflect pretty substantial increases as it relates to hospitality assistance, business contacts. We're also seeing increases as it relates to unhoused community member contacts. Calls for service appear overall to have increased about 117 calls in comparison to February of last year. Bike miles ridden also increased, and then scooter improper parking, and so that is our ambassadors as they're out patrolling the streets. If they do happen to see a scooter, an e-scooter that's laid on its side or is blocking pedestrian access, they are responsible and expected to relocate those scooters. And so you're seeing an increase as it relates to that. And so this chart just covers Santa Monica Boulevard. Our next chart is similar to what you've seen on Santa Monica, is concentrating now on Sunset. And so again, you're seeing that red bar, right? Last month of this year in comparison to the same month in 2023, we're again seeing increases more in the business contacts. And so just for context purposes, business contacts are our ambassadors that are assigned to that specific shift in that area that are out proactively making contact with businesses, letting them know if there are any issues, the number to contact, et cetera. And so it's merely a check-in. And so you're certainly seeing a little more proactiveness between Santa Monica Boulevard as well as Sunset. Our bike miles ridden also increased. Calls for service did increase, but it went from 4 to 16 calls, so there wasn't that much of a substantial difference as it relates to that. Unhoused community member contacts as well looked like there was an increase of about 8 from last year, that same month. So jumping to Melrose, again, we're also seeing increases, it looks like pretty much in all of those same categories that I mentioned on Santa Monica Boulevard as well as Sunset. And so you're seeing about a 30 or so difference. It looks like business contacts, bike miles ridden, calls for service, look like it did spike from 2 to 23. So there is a difference there in terms of Melrose. And then also just for context purposes, so we do have a number of kiosks that are out on these major thoroughfares. So Santa Monica Boulevard, our kiosk are our fixed post, kind of the podiums that you see right at certain intersections. And so we do have one that's over off of Santa Monica Boulevard in Robertson. We again have another that's kind of a little more central in Santa Monica Boulevard in the city, in front of the Ramada. We did relocate one of our kiosks that used to be on Melrose on over to Fairfax in Santa Monica Boulevard, and that was at the request of some community member input and feedback, as well as the Public Safety Commission. And so we have had a lot of success and a lot of positive feedback as it relates to that. And then we, of course, have had our standing kind of kiosk over on La Brea in Santa Monica Boulevard, across the street from the Gateway Commercial Center. We do have a kiosk as well over off of Sunset. And so next to our Sunset Spectacular parking lot and sign. So we do have a kiosk that's placed out there as well. And as I mentioned earlier, the one that was located on Melrose was relocated to Santa Monica and Fairfax. And then we do have 2 that are in our city parks. And so that's the next slide. This isn't speaking to the kiosk, but this is just speaking in general in terms of the activity that goes on and what our ambassadors that are assigned to Plummer Park have been dealing with. Certainly restroom counts. It looks like code violations. And so for context too, so our block-by-block ambassadors are not code enforcement officers, so they're not out there citing or have the responsibility of issuing any sort of citations. But if they do see any sort of like park rules and regulations that they obviously have become familiar with over time that are not being followed, then those are things that they address in terms of making contact with an individual and verbally trying to gain compliance. If they're unable to do that, then that's when they escalate it, and whether they contact code enforcement or even our sheriff's department for assistance. That's essentially what that is for. You're seeing social service referrals and unhoused community member contacts as well that look like they've substantially been increased in those areas. Similar to Plummer Park, you have West Hollywood Park. And so we're just looking at that same data. Looks like there's been an increase overall. As I'm going through all these slides, it appears right in all the areas of operations that our block-by-block team has been dealing with for the period of last month. And I'm getting pretty close, let's see, to the end here. So the 6th page is referring to the kiosk, as I mentioned, that are located in those various locations. So again, you're seeing increases across the board. Our residential patrols, so now this is speaking to the expansion of the block-by-block security ambassador program that was approved about a year and a half ago. And so this is covering the city and breaking it up into 3 different areas, right? The east side of the city, the center of the city, and the west side of the city. So essentially, we have block-by-block ambassadors assigned primarily in those residential areas, and their responsibility is to do foot patrols. in those areas, as well as some bike patrols. And so they're trying to be as proactive in terms of identifying any sort of suspicious activity that may be occurring. You are seeing a decrease on the east side of the city in some of the areas. However, it looks like calls for service jumped about 4 calls in comparison to the previous year, that same month. The center of the city looks like it's had some increase in a couple of the areas, and our west side of the city, again, it looks like it's decreased. Hospitality assistance, unhoused community member contact, but calls for service have also increased slightly. And then this slide is speaking to the entire city in terms of calls for service, unhoused resident contacts, business contacts, and all that information. So a lot of the bifurcated, right, slides that I just covered, right, this is compiling all that, combining it all in one and giving you kind of a context and sense. And so as I'm looking at the report, we certainly are focused on the calls for service overall, because those are complaints or reports, right, that are being brought to our ambassadors' attention, and they're responding, right. Whereas the other areas that you're seeing, it's more proactive work that the ambassadors are completing and performing. So just providing a little bit of context of that. And then the final slide is referencing all of the calls that were made to our Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department for the month of February. And so in this information you're seeing is more or less the date, the time, and the response time, because as we incorporated and implemented the residential patrol aspect of block by block, one of the metrics that we're using is any calls that are made to the Sheriff's Department for services, regardless of what that may look like. We certainly want to make sure, right, that we're looking at the response times, making sure that that assistance and the support is being provided, and then of course having those discussions with our Los Angeles County West Hollywood Sheriff Station personnel, as well as block by block. And so discussing that and meeting on a regular basis to kind of address any issues that may emerge. But this is essentially the last slide and the information that's included in that. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and apologies again for not being able to kind of answer any questions specific in terms of like some of the increases and whatnot, but hopefully the data kind of speaks for itself.
Commissioners, any questions for Director Rivas? Yes, Commissioner Ramian.
I do. Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Director Rivas, for your report. I have a just quick question. I'm trying to understand the difference between a restroom count and a restroom serviced. And this is for the kiosks at the park. Can you explain what the difference is between the two?
So the restroom count versus, and is there a specific slide maybe I can even pull up too?
I'm just looking at WeHo Park security ambassadors, February 23rd to February 24th. My page number isn't showing.
I think I have it up on the screen. Is this the one you're looking at here, the restroom count?
Yes.
Yes. And then are you comparing it to, you said restroom service. Got it, right. So yeah, my understanding is the restroom counts are, the volume of folks for that month that are logged. So, we have a kiosk, right, that's placed out in front of the restrooms, both at Plummer. Plumbers were, the initial kind of kiosk was placed because of safety concerns that were brought, right, to the city's attention, and so placing a kiosk there. So part of that responsibility for that ambassador is to make sure that they're logging, right, the number of folks that are coming in and out of the restrooms for the entire month. That is a good question in terms of restroom serviced, and so I'd have to get further information because obviously I don't see that bar on the West Hollywood Park, and that's probably what caught your attention. So I'll have to get more information as it relates to what the difference is between the counts versus serviced.
Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Blau?
Thank you. Danny, or Director Rivas, do you know if the number of security ambassadors has increased in the last year? I mean, this is a noticeable increase in activity.
You know, it definitely has fluctuated. I mean, with the onboarding and the expansion of the residential patrol program, that definitely increased the program by 30 FTEs. I don't want to call that out as being 30 new staff, but essentially, you know, around that, around the kind of that number, right? So it definitely increased. We had 55 and FTEs prior to the expansion of adding the 30, which jumped us up to 85. And so there definitely has been more ambassadors in the residential areas where they were not responsible for patrolling, you know, a more kind of fixed shift or assignment. So definitely the increases could be attributed to that, but we would have to take kind of a look, because I know the program was implemented in October of 2022 in terms of the expansion, and that obviously carried on into 2023, right? So as we're looking at the comparison between 2023 data and 2024 for February, definitely there was an increase, but yeah, we'd have to check. But we've been hovering around, you know, in the 85 to 90 percentile in terms of being fully staffed.
Okay. And then another question. I asked last month, and she's not here actually to answer the question, but about kind of like a heat map of deployments roughly about where block by block is around the city, because, you know, we hear from the community, especially on the east side, that, you know, either they've never seen block by block or they'd like to see block by block walking around, especially in some of the neighborhoods that don't have good lighting. How much information does the city get in terms of the deployments of block by block and insight into that?
So like as it relates to like what shifts and how many ambassadors, right, are assigned to the east side, west side, center of the city, you know, who's assigned to the residential versus kind of more of the commercial, our fixed posts, you know, kind of speak for themselves because you have one ambassador there for the most part, but you could have two staff there. So we are involved as it relates to the deployment. And as I mentioned a little earlier about the kiosk rotation from Melrose to Fairfax. So we certainly provide that direction and consult with our sheriff station and block by block as well. As it relates to kind of a heat map, and so that is something that we have been discussing. I know that their internal system and database that Block by Block has, it does have that capability to show, you know, a particular ambassador where they walked, right, where they patrolled. And there are certain touch points and checks and balances that they go through that their management staff is capable of looking into. We just need to see if we try to expand that, what that looks like, and how that would even look like in a heat map, right? Are you really going to be able to hone in on a specific area, or is it just going to cover the entire area? Because you have so many different staff, right, that are walking kind of different paths, but essentially are supposed to be patrolling their routes, right? And so we want to see what that takes a look like. So I'll definitely follow up with Erica on that.
Great, thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Commissioners, any other questions? Commissioner Secretary, do we have any public comments on this item?
Yes, we do. Steve Martin, if you want to approach the podium, you have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Steve Martin, West Hollywood. I do want to comment on the Fairfax kiosk. That seems to have been a good move. I walk there all the time, and it's one of the most heavily pedestrian areas in the city. But also the bus stop can sometimes be very problematic. It's a really heavily used bus stop. And my observation, unscientific as it will be, is that it seems calmer, it's cleaner, and I haven't seen any instances of people acting out since the kiosk has been there. So take that for what it's worth. One of the things that would be really helpful in the block-by-block reports is how many times they incorporate assistance from the mental health outreach workers. Because we've seen this huge spike, and we don't know where our resources are because there's no record. my observation from just walking around and driving around is I've seen sheriffs and block by block interact with homeless people acting out, and I've not ever seen a mental health outreach worker. So I just don't know how this works, but it would be good to know whether we have a mental health outreach worker there, and if that's a member of the city team, or if it's the sheriff's mental health team, which I believe still exists here. So I just think that would be really good information, because we're spending a lot of money, and I think we want to have some, for lack of a better word, key progress indicators to know how that program's working, because it's a program that I mean, I support the program. I'm just not sure that it's necessarily a program that's focused on reducing or freeing up time for the sheriff. So thank you.
Thank you. Commission Secretary, any additional public comments on this item?
Yes, we have Nick Roybal, if you want to approach the podium.
Hello, Commissioners. Again, real quick. I want to echo what Steve Martin said. As an East Side resident of the city, that interchange of Fairfax and Santa Monica Boulevard, and as somebody who only takes Metro in both directions, whether it's the 4 along Santa Monica Boulevard or the bus down Fairfax to Pico, it can get dicey during the evening time. So yes, the block by block ambassadors are critical, not only for each of our safety, but to just maintain decorum and our community. Also, it is very important that we have this information, and it is kind of troubling that we don't. And I think as a citizen of the city, I'm going to clearly say it is troubling that we don't have the actual rep from Block by Block here this evening. I appreciate you so much, Director Rivas, you know this, but that is very disturbing. And as a matter of decorum, as a company that we pay for, that would be like if our lieutenant and our captain and our sergeant didn't show up. That is what that would be, right? If we go along the lines of reasoning for why we hired Block by Block. Where are they? They're not here. Let that be known. Thank you.
Thank you. Commission Secretary, any additional comments on this item?
We don't have any additional comments.
All right, thank you. Then moving on to our redirected item, which will now be 8C, our monthly report from our Sheriff's Department.
Good evening, Commissioners. Chair Hallman, how you doing?
Good evening.
Okay, so for our information for the month of February, West Hollywood Station had 1,490 calls for service, 63 of these being for emergency responses. Deputies made 34 felony arrests and 55 misdemeanor arrests. West Hollywood Station Part 1 crimes for the month totaled 148, which is one of our lowest totals, probably on average for a long time. It's a really good number. It's a low number. Part 1 crime breakdown by district. Our West District had 51% of the crime, 76. City Center was 23% with 34, and our East End was 26% with 38. Of those Part 1 crimes, theft-related incidents accounted for the majority. Last month, we had an increase in the number of vehicle burglaries. The majority of these burglaries involved vehicles that had items left inside that were visible. We would like to remind people to keep their vehicle and their property safe by placing items in the trunk of their car, not leaving things in the back seat and the front seat that are visible. When that happens, it's a quick and easy grab for a thief. They see that, they're in and out of a car within seconds. In February, our station volunteers donated 292 hours, which included duties at the public counter, social media support, and station administrative tasks. On Wednesday, March 6th, the city celebrated our public safety professionals with a luncheon and awards ceremony. Several members from our station were honored with recognition for their hard work and dedication. We had over 40 members of our station staff that attended. We would like to thank the commission, members that attended. Our deputies truly appreciate the show of support and the dedication to our public safety. Thank you. On Sunday, March 17th, the Los Angeles Marathon will take place. The marathon traverses a 26-mile course through Los Angeles. The marathon will enter West Hollywood on Sunset Boulevard, just west of Crescent Heights. West Hollywood Station, along with West Hollywood Parking Enforcement, will be staffing street closures for the event. There will be significant closures in our city and surrounding areas. Streets will start being closed to traffic as early as 4 a.m. in some areas. If you need to travel out of the area, please plan ahead. These closures will affect traffic conditions and create delays in the area. For more information regarding the marathon and race information, maps, times, things like that, please visit the website, lamarathon.com. Also in our report, it was brought up that there was a citation for a scooter this time. You may have seen it on the stats. That citation was issued during our traffic enforcement. We did a motorcycle safety enforcement where they were looking for motorcycle violations and safety issues. And during that, they did see a scooter violation and did issue a scooter citation. Any questions?
Commissioners, any questions?
Can I just add one thing, just so
Oh,
before
yeah,
you ask
of
any
course,
questions?
Lieutenant Lappin.
I just want to address some of the questions that we had last month in regards to Commissioner Salzman. You had a couple of questions in regards to a body-worn camera and the percentage rate of activations. I know that we get daily and weekly updates on our percentage of activation, and we have been in the 90% or above 98%. I'm still trying to figure out with the department how we can maybe do a monthly report of what the average is for the month, and it's the squeaky wheel, just trying to get that information, because again, we've discussed our problems with our computer systems communicating, so that's working with the department, trying to figure out a way to get the average for the month on that. And then also for the racial identification, I'm still trying to figure out with the department how and if we can legally do that. I know that we have several reports that come out quarterly, and if it's anything different than what those reports are that come out. So I'm still trying to figure that out. So hopefully by next commission, I'll have an answer for you on that, and as to whether we have the percentage or whether or not we can do it. So I just wanted to address that. And then Commissioner Blau, in regards to the equipment, I'm in contact with the department to give us the minimum standards of because each station requires different numbers. So let's say our station, based on personnel, requires a certain amount of numbers. So I'm trying to get what the department identifies as the minimum so that I can move forward to figure out how we are, whether we're in compliance or what we need. So still trying to figure that out. So as soon as I get that information, we'll go ahead and bring it back to you.
Great, thank you.
Great. I just want to thank you as well. I appreciate both of those.
No problem. Hopefully we can get that information for you for next commission.
Thank you.
And then one other thing, traffic. I know that Sergeant Davis was here last week, and he was our traffic sergeant, and so he's been working with the traffic division at the station to conduct numerous operations. And those operations are going to be in the next couple of months. And I think he has a total of 20 different operations with the traffic unit and addressing a variety of things, which would be pedestrians, which would be scooters, which would be drunk driving, not necessarily a drunk driving what's my
checkpoint?
Checkpoint. I lost the train of thought on that one. Not necessarily checkpoints, but saturation. So it would be 4 or 5, traffic deputies that are not only are trained in identifying, people under the influence of not only alcohol but any other drugs. So he has a schedule of when they're doing them and what are the hours that he's going to do them. So we're addressing any traffic-related issue that comes up, not only from the commission, but from our council. Also, citations for traffic, I know that Holloway and La Cienega has been a big, talk, Fountain, so they're addressing. So anytime there is a question, whether it be on council or here, I send an email to them and say, hey, can you address this? So that's something that they do. So hopefully in the near future, we'll decrease the number of traffic accidents or increase the number of scooter citations or just education. Just again, it's not necessarily just citing, but sometimes by citing is how people understand. So I just wanted to bring that to the attention of the commission.
Thank you.
And now we're open for questions.
Commissioners, any questions?
Thank you for being here. Just to confirm, you do expect to start issuing more citations for scooters?
Yes,
as part of this?
that's one of the operations that, so they're going to be focusing on different things. So one of the operations is going to be just strictly scooter operations. So, and again, those are mainly going to be nighttime, weekend, and again, we're trying to figure out with our crime analyst what is the best time to do that. But yes, that's one of the focuses, scooter citations.
I think that's good news. Thank you.
I just want to piggyback before we go to you, since we were talking about scooters. Scooters and bicycles, what are the guidelines for sidewalks? I just want some clarification.
I know that a motorized, if there's no bike path, a designated bike path, then they can be on the sidewalk. If there's a designated bike path, they have to be on the street, traveling in the direction of traffic. You can get into the weeds as far as a scooter, and that's what Sergeant Davis was here to try and address, because I'm not the expert on that. So I know that scooters technically, because it's a motorized vehicle, you have to have a helmet, you have to have a license, you have to have certain criteria in order for you to have a scooter. But a lot of some of the issues with the scooter incidents that we have, it's not necessarily the scooters that they can rent for the day or the weekend. Sometimes it's personal scooters. So how do we track that information? How do we grasp that information on whether or not somebody has a license? Because you have to provide that information when you rent one, but how do you track that information when you buy it? So again, those are the issues that Sergeant Davis and his team are going to try to address. So hopefully, like I said, he's already started with some of the operations, but I can report back within, if an operation for scooter or whatever it was that they did for the month, I can have a report back as to what they covered for, in the monthly report. I can try and address it that way too.
But scooters and bicycles are supposed to yield to pedestrians, correct?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I know on the east side, we have yield to pedestrian signage between La Brea and Formosa. Director Rivas, I don't know about the rest of the city. Can we look into that type of signage?
And I believe they have, and when I say they, I'm looking at our engineering services division, as well as our facilities and field services, and even our parking services. So there's a couple of different departments, but absolutely I can send an email and kind of see, where they're at in terms of that. I don't know where all of them are located, but there should be some sort of signage that is posted along the areas where there's not a bike lane. Informing folks, so we can check into that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Commissioner Blau.
Thank you. And I just wanted to quickly say thank you so much for putting together this report. It's detailed. I know there's a lot of manual work that goes into it, especially regarding the traffic statistics, as you had mentioned previously. So I really appreciate it, and I think the public appreciates getting to see what all is going on in the work that the team is doing. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions for the Sheriff's Department? Yes.
Thank you, Chair Hallman. Thank you, Sergeant Duran and Lieutenant Lapkin, for your report. I was wondering if you had any update for the assault with a deadly weapon that occurred in the morning of the 15th of February. It was on a security ambassador. I know that one person was apprehended. The other one was not identified and was still at large. Have they been identified or apprehended?
That incident is still under investigation, but I can tell you that we are very, very, very close to identifying who our second person is. And I know that our station detectives are working with our Major Crimes Bureau in order to identify, locate the second individual.
Got it. Thank you. Not to put you on the spot, but Mr. Martin did mention something. The seal of the city with the rainbow flag should be on all of our patrol cars. I've noticed some that don't have it. I remember months ago I did a ride-along, I asked about it. Can you just...
I actually wrote it down on my notes when Mr. Martin brought it up, because I'm going to look into, because most cars should have the seal on it. I know that, because it's a sticker, because I know Jason will have more information on that.
Yeah, so the vehicles, when they come from our fleet division and they get sent out to us at the station, they typically come with those already affixed to the vehicle, and they are decals. Lately, it's been a budgetary issue with fleet providing those stickers, because they have to have them made and whatnot. A lot of different contract cities that we have, a lot of different units, so they have a lot of different requests. So the last couple vehicles that we've had come out new haven't had them. So it's just kind of a catch-up game. Once they start getting more of those stickers printed, they can come out and get them on our vehicles to get most of our vehicles updated. A small portion of our vehicles will not have those stickers, because we are responsible for some county area, Universal Studios, some of the areas to the west side. So the vehicles that are assigned to those areas wouldn't have the West Hollywood. So you will see some no matter what without them, but we're gonna do our best to get them updated as soon as we can.
Great, thanks. One last question. I read about a sort of disturbing incident where there was a cancellation of a book signing by Brett Gelman at Book Soup. It was over some anti-Semitic threats. Were you made aware of this? Did they reach out to you or anything before the cancellation, or ask for any help?
We were aware of the book signing that was coming up, and somebody that was affiliated with the sheriff's station and familiar with Book Soup and what was going on was kind of working as a middle person for us. They had made us aware. They had told us it was coming. They were also telling us that other events regarding his signings in different locations had been canceled because of it. So we were looking into figuring out what needed to be done staffing-wise, or if we needed to have some type of a response team necessary if a big protest were to show up. But even prior to getting anything on paper where it was going to be finalized, they notified us that they canceled the event, and they didn't give us a reason why.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Blau.
Thank you for the redirect. A quick question that had come up when I was looking through some other related items is about the LGBTQ sensitivity training that the sheriff deputies and the team undergoes here at the station. I just had a question. What is the policy on when that training needs to occur for deputies that are maybe rotating in new to the station or temporarily filling in? What is the policy on that?
We don't have a written policy as far as new deputies coming in, but we know that it's something that comes when we have orientation for new deputies that come in, and that's part of the orientation.
Okay.
So it's not written in stone that you shall, but we do. And then on that note, we've actually worked with the Department of California DOJ to actually have training through them, and that was back in December, October of last year, and we had about 40 of our personnel attend, and this was a training provided to us by DOJ, Cal DOJ, their community service. So we've had about 40 deputy personnel attend that, and that's something that we're hopefully going to continue to work with them to have that. And we're also still working with various community members to try and incorporate a West Hollywood, and I'm giving it in quotes, West Hollywood specific curriculum part of our post-certified training that the department provides. So we're still working on that. I know that we had a meeting with the sheriff 2 weeks ago, and that was one of the questions that came up. But we're moving forward. I mean, we've done a lot to try and get that type of training and to get our deputies to have that type of information. One of the things that we're working on is, for Pride, during our briefing that we have, we're going to have, we're figuring out a way of during our briefing is provide, it's a spirit of the law, not letter of the law when we have Pride, and basically just educate our deputies that are not from West Hollywood. Because as you know, on any Pride given weekend, we have about 300 deputies per day. So then that's something that the station cannot fulfill. So one of our trainings is to incorporate that. Obviously, it's not going to be an 8-hour course. It's going to be something that we touch base during our briefing, and just and we're trying to figure out that curriculum now as to what exactly we're looking at videos, we're looking at handouts, we're looking at various things that we can educate our deputies when they come here, so that they're aware of our community members. And again, we don't have to worry about that for our station deputies because they do get that. But the outside deputies that come in just to work the overtime, because most of them are, they're drafted to work this position. They're voluntold, because of our staffing shortages that we have, and we always have people wanting to come and work the overtime here, but Pride and Halloween, it's something that we require more than people volunteering. So that is definitely something that we're working on, and hopefully it's not just on a specific event, but any big event, it's going to be part of our briefings.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Commissioners, any additional questions for our Sheriff's Department? Commission Secretary, do we have any public comments on this item?
Yes, we do. Nick Roybal, if you want to approach the podium, you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you again, Commissioners. Thank you to our incredible leadership from our West Hollywood Sheriff Station, and thank you, Director Rivas, and your entire team. So, consequence. Are there any consequences in our city for breaking a law? I heard tonight from Director Rivas, and I quote, "The data speaks for itself." Good, so let's look at data, shall we? As we say that Part 1 crimes are down in the city, true, but of the Part 1 crimes, armed robbery is up 25%. That's a big deal to me if we look at data, right? If somebody's putting a gun at your head, that matters, right, Commissioner? Part 2 crimes are up. So we can talk about Part 1 crimes, fine, but Part 2 crimes, here I have some data. Well, let's go back to Part 1. There have been 4 rapes in our city. It's February. As a survivor myself of sexual violence, 1 rape is too many. I have always been upfront and very vocal about this. So 4 rapes, it's March, okay. 26 vehicle burglaries, 14 shoplifting, 5 grand theft, 9 petty, 35 petty theft. And then I go to the pickpocketing. 1 arrest out of 76, I believe. So, and we can say, yes, I know that's a DA question, fair, but as a community, as commissioners, how are we communicating that? How are we speaking with our small business owners? I speak with them all the time, and they say, well, Nicholas, there is no consequence. So if there is no consequence, what does all this data matter for? Seriously, what does it matter that we sit here and we as commissioners ask, we want this data? Well, if there is no consequence, what does it mean to have this data? What does it do other than give you a little paycheck? So yeah, the data speaks for itself. Where is the consequence? Where? Thank you.
Thank you. Commission Secretary, do we have any additional public comments?
We don't have any additional comments.
Okay, great, thank you. So circling back to item 7A, which is unfinished business, the Public Safety Commission will discuss the renewal of the Los Angeles County Sheriff Department's contract. And commissioners, we had this discussion um, at our February meeting. So this is our opportunity to continue that discussion. So would anyone like to start?
I press the button.
And there you are, you just showed up, Commissioner Blau. Little time delay, sorry
Yeah,
about
a little
that.
time delay. Thank you, Chair. Speaking specifically to the contract, having a little bit additional time to look through the contract itself, a particular clause within here that I had previously skipped pretty quickly over gives me a little bit of concern, and I would like to raise it here. It's specifically section 2.4. It's on page 6 of the PDF, but basically it says, in the event of a dispute between services rendered between the sheriff and the city, final determination as to the dispute goes to the sheriff. That doesn't seem right to me. I don't know what we can do about that, but you know, speaking about the services that that our sheriff does for us, and the sensitivity of their nature, you know, we're talking about policing and safety. If there is a dispute and an inability to come to an actual compromise, if it defers to the sheriff, I personally see problems with that. I don't know how any of my other commissioners feel about that.
Commissioners, would anyone like to weigh in?
What page was that on, Commissioner Brown?
On the actual contract, it's on page 2. In the attachment, it's on page 6, if you're scrolling through the PDF. Administration of personnel. In an unresolved dispute, the Sheriff's Department shall have final and conclusive determination as between the parties hereto. I mean, if I'm relating this contract to, you know, any other kind of contract, you know, employment contracts, those go to arbitration a lot. A lot of modern employment contracts have arbitration clauses within them. You know, other kinds of service contracts, if you're going to go dine at a restaurant, you know, the cliche is the customer is always right. Now, I don't think that necessarily we need to. I think that's been invoked overly sometimes. But I see a bit of a disparity here, and it doesn't necessarily feel fair. I don't think that this has practically been the experience that the city has had. You know, we're a member of the Contract Cities Association, and you know, especially with Sheriff Luna, and as we see tonight, we have a lot of good working rapport. But that clause specifically gives me concern, and especially given the broader context of the contract, that really doesn't talk about you know, sort of specific nature. I find it troubling.
I do see what you're saying, and I'm assuming that our city attorney has pretty much reviewed this contract and has looked at it with a fine tooth. So maybe Director Rivas, you know, I know our city attorney has looked at this contract, and maybe if we could get more clarification on what that clause means in regards to the city of West Hollywood and the contract with the Sheriff's Department?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do have I had a short presentation actually that I wanted to provide the commission and members of the community, because you know, I know that there were a lot of questions and ask, and obviously hearing Commissioner Blau also mention about the language that's included in the 5-year municipal services agreement that all contract cities enter into. And so just for a point of clarification, so individual cities like West Hollywood do not have the ability to make adjustments to the contract that you have in the attachment. So as we're going through the contract renewal process, that is something that you have representatives from all of the 42 cities that currently contract with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department at this time are involved in. Most of all of those representatives are the city managers for those cities. Of course, they receive the input and feedback from their elected officials, their city councils members as a part of that process. But you also have the California Contract Cities Association, and again, that's made up of all of the contract cities that contract with Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. And so they are an advocate on behalf of the contract cities. That's how they were formed. And that is their primary role and responsibility, amongst other things. And so as a part of that contract renewal process, that is something that obviously is voiced, is communicated, but it isn't just the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department that's involved in that process. You have the Los Angeles County Council, which essentially is the County of Los Angeles's city attorney's office, per se, that serves, on behalf of the entire county of Los Angeles, their chief executive office, and that contract also goes to the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors for approval. So that information, essentially, in terms of what's reflected in the 5-year contract, that is an attachment to the staff report that was on last month. It's on this month's agenda. That is something that is addressed and communicated at that point. So the point I'm making is we hear the request and the concern, can definitely push that information on to the folks that are a part of that discussion with the county. But I just don't want there to be any sort of expectation or imply that what's being asked in terms of that 5-year contract is something that falls under the purview of the Public Safety Commission at this time, or is something that's being considered. I do know that language has come up in the past for discussion, and it is definitely something that is communicated and I know is discussed with other contract cities, with the County of Los Angeles. But essentially that remains, at least at this point, at this time, language that's incorporated. Whether that language is going to be adjusted or not will definitely be something that we will see with the new contract once it's approved. And then for each city that chooses and elects to contract with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department for municipal law enforcement services, then they, of course, would be signing that contract. And so we have every intent of moving forward. And so I know, like, kind of the discussion and the questions surrounding renewal, what we're looking for the Public Safety Commission's input and feedback on relates to the annual service level agreement. So what you're seeing there on the second bullet point, which is the 575 annual service level authorization, that is really the focus. But at the same time, staff really wanted the commission and members of the community to be informed, to be educated about the 5-year contract as a whole, in terms of what's entered into by every city, again, that chooses to contract with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department for law enforcement services. And then every year, right, each city now has the ability to take a look at that annual service level authorization, which is what the commission essentially was asked to provide input and feedback on. So apologies if there was confusion as it relates to that. The ask for the Contract Services Bureau from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, those representatives that attended last month's meeting, their intent was to go over this information, to answer any questions. And I will tell you, with Lieutenant Lapkin, Sergeant Duran, and even Captain Mulder from our station, it's a big ask in terms of having those representatives come and attend a Public Safety Commission meeting. But we really thought it was important and essential to have them here, have them present, give an opportunity for you all to ask as many questions as you want from the experts that deal with the contract cities and that are a part of the discussions, right, that are ongoing as it relates to all of the contract cities, input, feedback, concerns as a whole, right, that are communicated. So that was the intent of having those representatives there last meeting, which we again really truly appreciate them attending and coming through, and hopefully that was somewhat helpful. You know, the Public Safety Commission's role in this process is what I've highlighted in the second bullet point that stems from what's in the municipal code, reimagining public safety from alternative community-based systems. And so I know there was some discussion at last meeting in terms of maybe looking at, and I think it was Commissioner Nickel that kind of mentioned, hey, we heard about there being another type of position that another city was hiring or looking into that was kind of like a hybrid between maybe you know, a code enforcement officer or ambassador or whatnot that was unarmed. And so those types of options, that type of input and feedback obviously speaks to this. And it is something that staff is looking into because that was also a directive and ask from our city council for staff to look into any sort of other alternative means to assist and support our community safety efforts here in West Hollywood. You're also seeing that improving citizen input, right, on public safety issues, you know, taking a look at the training. So it was mentioned a little bit earlier about the LGBTQ sensitivity training, right? So that's definitely something that's very relevant and important. And so if there's other training, other proposals, et cetera, that the commission feels are needed, then that's definitely something that we can take back and obviously communicate to the city council. And you're seeing kind of the proposal of service level recommendations. And so that again speaks to the annual service 575 form that I mentioned is what we're taking a look at. So that's really the ask of the commission, you know, at this time, but definitely here, Commissioner Blau and others in terms of the request can definitely, you know, forward that information on to the folks who are there. But again, I just don't want to imply or again give any expectation that, well, you know, are we deciding to contract with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department or not at this time? That's not what's on the table here. And also, you know, whether or not there's language that's included in that 5-year municipal law enforcement services contract that's up for discussion. That is not something that we are asking the commission to weigh in because they've already been negotiating for quite some time. Our current contract, as well as the other 41 cities, that contract with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. That contract is set to expire on June 30th of this year. And so, of course, you know, between now and then, things will get flushed out. You know, there'll be a proposal that's made, and then that contract will go to the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors for approval. And once it's approved, and if it's approved by the Board of Supervisors, then every single contract city will then have to place that item, that contract renewal item with the language as is on the city council's agenda for adoption and approval. If a city chooses not to, then essentially you would not be having any sort of law enforcement services being provided. So that's why I mentioned a little earlier that the city has all the intention to continue to move forward with our law enforcement contract, but duly noted in terms of the input and feedback that we received, and we'll definitely pass that on to the folks on our end, which on our end is our city manager, who is representing the city of West Hollywood as a part of those contract negotiations, along with the other 41 contract city representatives. I also just wanted to highlight one last thing before turning it back over to the commission, is the first bullet point on this slide talks about a contract moratorium that's currently in place by the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. And so what that moratorium focuses on is at this time preventing any sort of contract cities from adding any additional staffing to their 575 annual service level. So we have seen in the last 18 months or so 3 additional sworn positions that have been added, right, with the approval of our city council to our 575 form. So we've had one sergeant assigned to our entertainment policing team. We've had one deputy assigned to our entertainment policing team. And then most recently, in January of this year, we had the approval of one patrol deputy. So all three of those positions, and the reason why I'm emphasizing those, is that they have not been formally added to our 575 form with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department because of this current moratorium. And that moratorium is planned to continue to be in place moving forward. If things change, if we're informed that they're lifting the moratorium, then those positions will then be added to our 575 because we've already received approval from the City Council. We are, however, able to fill those positions currently through a different process that still requires the approval of the Sheriff's Department. And how we're doing that is we're asking that the department consider for us to backfill those positions in the interim during this moratorium through overtime. And the department has approved those three positions. They certainly don't have to, but they have. And why that's important is we, as a contract city, actually don't pay that overtime rate. We are just paying the same contractual rate that we have for all contract cities to fill these positions. And the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department is actually picking up whatever additional costs would go into play as it relates to overtime positions. They would pick that up. And so it's a win-win for the city in terms of the fact that the Sheriff's Department has been willing to continue to approve the last three positions through this separate approach, this separate method. But on our 575 form currently, you will not see those three positions that I mentioned. They haven't been added, and that's because of the moratorium that's currently in place. That's also the reason why the two non-sworn public information officer positions that the City Council approved have not been added to the contract as well because of the moratorium. And so I just wanted to kind of speak to that a little bit, provide some context that hopefully will be a little bit helpful as the discussion this evening evolves. So I'm done with my comments, Chair and Commission, and turn it back over to you.
And thank you, Director Rivas. I did not mean to leapfrog your comments. I'm sorry about that. Also, I just wanted to make mention, I'm not sure if you're aware, but the bullet points you spoke of, they're not showing on our monitors here. I don't know if they're not working, only behind us. So just wanted to let you know that. And the final point you made, did come up with our last discussion. So, commissioners, with that additional information, do we have any comments? Commissioner Vice Chair Saltzman.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Danny, for clarifying the issue about the service level. Having said that, I think the issue of service level is a very important issue. And as I think about issues that we would like to have the City Council taking into account when it's evaluating its decision to renew the sheriff's contract, the service level is one of the most important. And so I think there's some frustration there. But I appreciate your at least clarifying situation. I also expressed some frustration last month about how what I consider the contract to be opaque with respect to what I think are some of the most important issues that ought to be concerning us. Specifically, what are our deputies actually doing? What does their patrol look like? How are they responding to calls? Whether there's compliance with department policies, and if not, what happens as a result when the deputies are out of compliance? If there should be new or revised policies as recommended by the Inspector General, if you look on the Inspector General's website, there are many reports, each of which have many recommendations, many of which are for new improved policies for the Sheriff's Department, many of which have not been implemented. And so I'm going to highlight just a small number of those that I think are particularly important, that in the context of our having the ability to provide some input to the City Council as it considers the contract, what are some issues that they might want to have in their minds. One would be aggregate anonymous data regarding complaints and how complaints are resolved, including discipline, if any. We're often told that the Police Officers' Bill of Rights prohibits that. The police agencies up and down the state of California, including the Los Angeles Police Department, provide that aggregate anonymous data regarding complaints and how the complaints are resolved, including discipline. And I know from experience, it gives a pretty clear picture of what's happening in a number of areas. And I would encourage the council to think about that as an issue to raise with the sheriff when they have the opportunity. Similarly, aggregate anonymous data regarding discipline itself, sorted by the type of violation and including the resolution of the matters. Again, this is not about individual deputies. This is aggregate anonymous data that other police departments throughout the state of California provide to the public. Another, compliance with department policies related to on-body cameras. We've talked about that a little bit. I appreciate very much the work that Lieutenant Lapkin's doing on that already. And I think that will come back and be something important to talk about. Transparency with regard to use of force incidents and their review. There are major sections of Inspector General reports regarding the lack of transparency and the lack of standard policy with respect to use of force incidents in the department. And then one relatively large area that I'm just take just a moment to go through a little bit of detail about, because the Inspector General does that so well, which is issues related to profiling and in particular pretextual stops. The Inspector General has made recommendations most recently in March of 2023 and has reiterated those in February of 2024, which are essentially that the Sheriff's Department needs to come into line with best practices with respect to restricting pretextual stops. And there are a series of specifics that the Inspector General points out, and I'll just highlight two or three of those. That there would be no pretextual stop unless there is articulable, reasonable suspicion regarding a serious crime, not a mere hunch by the deputy. The deputies shall articulate on the body-worn camera the reason for the stop prior to their encounter with the individual. That if the deputies fail to follow the policies, the department may initiate administrative investigation with appropriate disciplinary outcome. And the deputies shall adhere to existing policy, this is not new policy, by not using a person's race, color, ethnicity, national origin, religion, gender identity, disability, or sexual orientation as a factor to any extent or degree in establishing reasonable suspicion or probable cause, except as part of actual and credible descriptions of a specific suspect in any criminal investigation. And finally, one last set of issues that if Commissioner Freiberg were here, I know she would raise, so I'm going to raise on her behalf. And that is the issues related to SB 1421, the Right to Know Act. The public has the right to know with respect to three categories of incidents with respect to sheriffs, deputies, and police officers. Any incident where a law enforcement officer fires a gun at a person or uses force that results in serious injury or death. If an officer has committed a sexual assault against a member of the public, And if an officer is engaged in dishonesty in the investigation, reporting, or prosecution of a crime or police misconduct. It's required by state law that that information be made available to the public. And according to the Inspector General, the Sheriff's Department is not yet doing that. So those are just a few issues that I think rise to the level of some importance, and that I would recommend that City Council take into account in its discussions with the sheriff with respect to engaging in the contract. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Commissioners, anyone else with comments?
And Chair, if maybe we could have any questions first from any of the commissioners regarding the information, and then after the questions, if we could open it up to public comment to allow members of the community to weigh in, and then once that's completed, then the commission can continue to discuss it, which would allow members of the community to, provide their input prior to the discussion, if that's okay with the commission.
Yes, thank you. All right, commissioners. Commissioner Blau.
Thank you. I guess I do have a question, and it's related to a frustration, maybe. Why do we not have the current 575 in part of this packet? Or, we haven't seen it. The one we've been looking at is from 2019, and there's been several revisions, I think, to it since then, or really any of the other 575 forms. Do we have those available somewhere?
So we do, and the second attachment to the staff report actually gives the snapshot that's focused on sworn personnel based off of what has been approved in the 575 forms. So that was on last month's agenda. It's on this month's agenda. That's also the same data that we have been presenting to the City Council based on kind of that more focused approach. What you don't see on that spreadsheet and that information for like the last 17 plus years of information that's on there, so is non-sworn personnel, which is right now we have 4. So like an administrative assistant, a clerk, and law enforcement technician positions. But those are non-sworn at the station. They're not out in the field. They're not police officers. So that has been obviously the focus. And so we just wanted to remain kind of consistent in line with what's been presented as these discussions have emerged the last year and a half.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, commissioners. Any additional questions before we move to public comments? Are we good? All right. So with that, Commission Secretary, do we have any public comments at this time on this item?
Yes, we do. First public comment is from Colin Boyd. If you want to approach the podium, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, good evening. I think it's completely unacceptable that we cannot negotiate this contract. That's insanity to me, what we've just heard. We have very different needs than La Cañada, than Malibu. We are our own city with our own problems, and I just think it's just crazy to me what we've just heard. So one major concern I have is with the inherent imbalance with our current contract, because we're spending taxpayer money on agreements that lack clearly defined outcomes or objectives. This should be true of any and every contract that our city enters into. Every representative of this city should be ensuring there is accountability to deliver the service levels we as a city expect to receive. This contract is terrible. We are getting fleeced as taxpayers. You don't hire a roofer to just show up and glance at your roof. You hire a roofer to fix the roof. If I'm already paying for 62 roofers who are only obligated to clock in every morning and do nothing else, hiring 20 more, if you even can, is not going to solve my problem and my roof will not get fixed. Unclear to me if we are even allowed to hire more police people, which is, again, just crazy. If we are already footing the bill for these sheriffs, their only contractual obligation is to clock in. Adding more is not going to make people feel safer. We need action and not just numbers. Again, I'm all for increasing the number of sheriffs, but as a taxpayer and a voter, there needs to be a clear investment case of what we as a city are going to get in return for all of the money that we are spending. It's time to set clear expectations. There should be specified response times for calls. There should be dedicated officers to rein in the traffic chaos on Fountain Avenue or San Vicente and Santa Monica, which is also terrible. And we should be introducing foot patrols to be an effective complement to the existing block-by-block services. We should write these into the contract via an addendum or an appendix to make sure that we're getting the outcomes that we expect as a city. None of the stuff that we just talked about in 8B is contractually provided. They're just sort of doing it because we've told them to. They're gonna start focusing on scooters. There's no obligation or requirement for how long that will last, and it should be ongoing. The scooters are annoying, they suck. Sorry, another frustration. So we should not forget the significance and utility of service level agreements in fostering accountability and engendering trust. We are paying customers, and it is never unreasonable to negotiate. That's all, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Next, we have Nick Roybal. You'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you, commissioners. First, I have to say, need to say, must say that our lieutenant, our sergeant, and every sheriff, woman, man, and person that works at this station and for every contract city does more than just clock in and clock out. And I will not allow our women, men, and people in uniform who defend our lives every day to be diminished if we call that language. We also do have an entertainment policing team that do work. I see them out. We also are working towards accountability and are working towards trust. That does take work, which is why each of you is up on this dais, to get closer to whatever that vision is of accountability and whatever that vision of trust is. I feel we are getting lost in the weeds in terms of mechanics of a contract and theory over policing. What are we here to do? The mechanics of a contract, which we know there's a moratorium for a year. Captain Mulder has already said in February at the council meeting he wanted a deputy. Council agreed to it. So, in my view, we're just having a praxis discussion, a discourse discussion over policing. That's always needed. But that's not what we're doing in this moment. It's the mechanics of the issue. And Captain Mulder has already said to the council in February what he needed, and it was already agreed to. So any other discussion is moot at this point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. And our final speaker is Steve Martin. If you want to approach the podium, you'll have 3 minutes.
Well, I do think a lot of good comments and good points have been brought up, but they're not necessarily ones that need to be confined to the contract negotiation process. This issue of protractual stops, SB 1421, the training of deputies both at the station and at the academy. I don't know what kind of control you have over your agenda, but all of these items can be agendized separately and discussed cumulatively during the year where the public can participate and that where everybody's educated and coming to the table. I'm obviously not everybody is up to date exactly with what the Inspector General's recommendations are. Maybe there should be a study session on that. But I'm not really sure. I think we've gotten really far off into the weeds on some of the stuff with the contract, although a lot of the points that are made are valid and maybe interesting, but I think the public is concerned based on what we have seen recently and what we have seen in the past. Is this just a discussion of trying to defund the sheriff, which frankly is not acceptable. It's a little disturbing to assume that our deputies check in and then sit around with their finger up their ass. You know, we don't ask the city employees the same question, and maybe we should, but all you have to do is do a ride along or go, if you're sitting at the courthouse watching people coming in and testifying, it's not like these men and women deputies, these people are not busy. We have friends who work the desk at the sheriff as volunteers. They can tell you how busy these deputies are. And to say, well, we don't know what we're getting, we would never hire a contractor. You know, if there were, you know, there's, what, 32 contract cities, if there were 32 different departments we could contract with, we'd have a different situation here. Frankly, I would advocate abolishing having an elected sheriff, just making this a department of the county, and we would have a much different contract negotiation. But that's probably pie in the sky. It is difficult. You can't always get what you want when you've got a number of other jurisdictions who have nothing in common with you and frankly don't really care other than they just want to make sure that their streets are patrolled. And I'm not saying we should be in a position where we don't care. I think it's important that we've heard expressions that people want to see the sheriff be the best sheriff possible and be the most progressive and accountable sheriff possible. You're not hearing those conversations from other cities. I have to tell you, when I went and testified in front of the Board of Supervisors when we had issues with the Sheriff's Department, if I can finish my thought.
You can finish your thought.
I sat with Chris Fairchild for 8 hours to have an opportunity to talk about the creation of the Colts Commission. Every city that was represented by the county brought elected officials and testified as to the fact they had no problems with the sheriff. And this included communities of color. West Hollywood had 0 public officials come and testify. The Colts Commission was created despite opposition from the Sheriff's Department and from the communities that it worked. So I get it, but we've got to, if we're going to be effective, let's figure out ways to be effective and not just try to cram this all in one discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Secretary, any additional public comments?
We don't have any additional comments in chambers.
Okay, so commissioners, getting back on track, I apologize if I confused anyone. We should have been questions. Director Rivas gave his report. We have heard from the public, and now we are at our discussion point, correct, Director Rivas? Okay, just want to clarify for all commissioners, my error. So with that being said, any discussion points that any commissioners would like to bring up? Commissioner Nickel?
Thank you, Chair Hallman. So I've been in touch since our last meeting with Dr. Stephen Mello. He's an assistant professor of economics at Dartmouth. He has a PhD from Princeton. He wrote a paper in the peer-reviewed Journal of Public Economics called More Cops, Less Crime. The highlights of that paper are as follows. Each additional officer prevented 4 violent crimes and 15 property crimes. On average, the social value of a marginal officer exceeds $300,000. This was written in 2018. The number he put later in the paper to it was $352,000. If you adjust it for dollars today, that's $432,119.92. Getting a little deeper into it, as far as nonviolent crimes, he says an additional police officer prevents 1.9 robberies and 5.1 auto thefts. And he also said that the police reduce murders. Each officer prevents 0.11 murders, and thereby has 1 life can be saved by hiring an additional 9.5 police officers. He says the police presence reduces crime by deterring potential offenders. I want to repeat that because this came up last time. And it is something that a lot of people say, that the police are responsive, that they do not deter crime. Police presence reduces crime by deterring potential offenders. He goes on to say that hiring police is the major policy instrument used by local governments for crime prevention, which we are, and that's our goal, crime prevention. So I just wanted to follow up on his information. I am happy to provide his email address to any of the commissioners later on. And again, I would like the public to be aware of this paper. It is in the peer-reviewed Journal of Public Economics. It is Dr. Stephen Mello, M-E-L-L-O. The title of it is More Cops, Less Crime. In my email conversation with him, he responded because I said, the way he came about this is he did a study based on the Obama administration. When they came into office, of course, we were in the middle of an economic crisis, and a lot of police forces had been cut around the country. So this provided a perfect example to do an experiment. He broke data down because we spent $1 billion hiring police across the nation. So as that was done, he compared before and after. It's all in the paper, and that's how he arrived at this. So my concern is, well, a lot of things have happened since then. This was 2009, 2010. He wrote it in 2018. We've had a lot happen since then. And he said, my paper is not an outlier. Rather, it is one of several on this topic that has led to what is essentially a consensus on the point among economists and to a lesser extent criminologists that expanding police forces reduce crime. Again, each additional police officer prevented 4 violent crimes and 15 property crimes. So I wanted us to have that in our minds as we move forward and as we discuss. I certainly have more that I can say. But yeah, I wanted to lay that out there. Oh, and one thing, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. Just to clarify, Director Rivas, when I did mention that the other position, that's sort of a hybrid position that Santa Monica was looking at, an alternative policing position, I want to make very clear that is in addition to. I am against at any point reducing police forces for any kind of alternative policing. So if it is something that makes sense, it's cost effective, they can do more than block by block, then it's certainly something to look into.
Correct.
Great.
Yes.
Just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Nichols. Commissioners, anyone else with comments? Commissioner Harrison?
Sorry, I want to apologize that I was not at the last meeting. I know that a lot was discussed. You know, and I've done my own research and reading, and I'm glad that Commissioner Nichols brought up that particular paper. There are several others. I mean, there's a bunch of source material out there, and what I have not come across is how decreasing police leads to less crime. That paper's missing, unless someone has it. I'd love to see it. So I really do support the track that we're on, or seem to be on now, but I also really liked some of the comments I heard about, you know, potentially putting, you know, people on bikes, walking the beat more, just those types of things that I hear consistently from people. And yes, it's anecdotal, but I spend a lot of time in the city, 99% of my time in the city. And so I'm talking to people, seeing people. A lot of my friends are in the city and experience and share the exact same frustrations that I think, you know, we all probably do. So I just wanted to say that I'm fully in favor of, once the moratorium and other things go away or subside, in getting fully staffed. But I realize we're not putting that in this. Thank you.
Commissioner, any additional comments? Commissioner Blau.
Thank you. It seems that there was maybe a miscommunication, at least regarding my stance, as it seems it's being purported. I've never said, you know, we should defund the police. We should, you know, drop levels of service in lieu of something else, right? That's not my stance, and that's not what I think is effective. But I also want to know what we're going to do with additional police, right? You just mentioned fully staffed, right? What is fully staffed? And to some of the community members' comments, right? People don't feel safe, and that is important, right? That feeling of safety. But as well, right? When you look at the numbers, you know, we're at 62 sworn law enforcement total now, right? I think as of the beginning of February now. I guess sworn deputies, that's a specific limit in there. But, you know, when we look at the total calls for service, I mean, 62 is the most we've had since 2013 as a city, as far as I can tell from documentation, at least within that category. And, you know, last year, 2023, we had the lowest number of calls for service. The third lowest calls for service. But anyways, we're far lower in terms of calls for service than when we were more highly staffed. But when, you know, the same conversations weren't being had, at least at this degree. So my question would be, you know, what is fully staffed? And if we have an inability to adjust in an increase method, the sheriff right now, which is what it sounds like it is, what are we gonna do in that interim, right? What are the other options that we've got? Do we increase, do we recommend that we increase some of our other service providers? Because, you know, as it's been pointed out time and time again, one of the key factors of local municipal government is safety, right? Community safety. And the legislative branch of that, which is, you know, what our job is here to do, is to advise to City Council on legislative, is the vehicle to start that. And then there's the men and women who actually execute the work, right?
Thank you. Commissioners, any other comments? Director Rivas, can you just clarify, per the Sheriff's Department, when it comes to deputies, there is a shortage of deputies at this time overall?
That is correct.
Correct.
Yes.
So then, with that being said, are we just like in a hiring freeze, or are we where we're allotted to be at this time because of that said shortage?
Yes, from a formal kind of annual service level perspective, yes. We wouldn't be able to add any positions to our contract, to our annual service level authorization form. I shouldn't say contract, but to our annual service level authorization form. And I know the commissioners, I didn't know that you were unable to view on your screens, but I know it's on the big screen and you would have to turn around, but the second attachment to the staff report that I mentioned that shows, you know, the last 17 plus years of the history of sworn positions that have been approved. The last column that's reflected and titled as fiscal year 24B at the bottom, right, that currently shows 62 sworn staff. So that's approved positions. That 62 number, though, is not on our 575 right now, because as I mentioned, the last 3 positions, we've been able to take advantage of that different method of getting those positions filled, which every single time that we have an approval, the city, you know, writes a letter that goes to the Sheriff's Department and makes that request. And then it's up to the Sheriff's Department to make a decision on whether they will approve that methodology, right, in the interim during this moratorium. So we've been fortunate to be able to have these positions filled utilizing this methodology, but there's no guarantee. And as I mentioned, the non-sworn positions, the 2 public information officer positions, those positions have been approved as well. but they have not been filled because of the moratorium. I know Lieutenant Lapkin and Sergeant Duran have communicated right to the commission and to members of the community that they're trying to fill one of the law enforcement technician positions, which has the candidate has the experience to kind of serve in that capacity and help out in the interim. But that is separate, right, from the 2 PIO positions that the council approved. So, you know, as we are discussing this evening, and you know, we just attended a conference with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department last week with all contract cities that were in attendance and sent representatives. And so the moratorium remains in place, and that's anticipated as we move into the next fiscal year, which begins on July 1st of this year. You know, that certainly could change, you know, and I know there's going to be discussions between the sheriff and the sheriff's office with the Board of Supervisors in terms of just like we are going through our budgetary process here, so are they. And so all of that is going to be discussed in terms of any sort of requests that the Sheriff's Department provides, you know, to the Board of Supervisors, which ultimately needs to be approved by the Board of Supervisors, no differently than our budget, right, gets proposed, is recommended for approval to our city council for consideration and adoption. And so as we stand, the moratorium is anticipated to be and continue to be in place for the foreseeable future. But again, as soon as we have any updates as it relates to that, then we would be working on adding those positions that have already been approved by the city council.
Great, thank you for the clarification. Commissioners, any additional comments? Commissioner Nickel.
Thank you, Chair Hallman. I did meet after the last meeting with Captain Mulder and Lieutenant Lapkin. One of the things that Captain Mulder mentioned, I know the numbers aren't solidified yet, but that he would probably be, I believe he will be asking for the supplemental funding budget to be raised. So it's in this, it's out of this that we do overtime officers for beat patrols sometimes, and for protests and things. We've had a lot of that. I can imagine there'll be more coming up. So that seems completely reasonable. I just want to say, because I know that our comments do go to council, that I support this. I believe it's at about 900,000 now, so it'll probably go up over $1 million. I think that makes sense. Of course, I would like to see us vote to add more sworn officers, but there's the moratorium now. There's no guarantee that that could happen. So I just wanted to get this information out for when it's lifted, for when we can do that, that I think that we should certainly look at raising the number of sworn officers that we have. And another reason is the Public Policy Institute of California, they did talk about, they've done a statewide review of a survey of people, and they talk about how their approval of the police, that it has decreased with the number of officers. So the approval has dipped since 2020, since there have been fewer officers. And to me, it's sort of like this feedback loop of, we're in a moratorium partially because it's been made to be a profession that people are leaving early and recruitment is tougher. And then you have fewer officers, so response times go up, people feel bad about it, they don't like it, and then they get mad at the officers. So I just, it's sort of like backdoor defunding in a way. So I just wanted to share that little bit of information too. That's all. Thank you.
Commissioners, anything else?
If I may.
Yes, go ahead, Commissioner
Thank you,
Blow.
Chair. I'm curious, Commissioner Nickel, when you talk about increasing, you know, again, I think the question that keeps coming back to me that's really unclear, and it doesn't seem like we've got good numbers, right? I like numbers, as has been pointed out, but to back up, you know, what do you consider? It seems like you've done some research about what is fully staffed, right? or any of the other commissioners, right? What do you think? And I don't know if our if our police, our sheriff guests can weigh in on that at all, or have any thoughts. But that's, I mean, I'm curious.
I'll go first, and then if anyone else wants to weigh in. So, I mean, for one thing, we're dealing with different types of crime than we were before. It's just one, but we are down one from where we were before the pandemic. And now you have people with semi-automatic machine guns robbing people outside of restaurants. It's, so I talked before about the national averages the FBI puts out. I can repeat it again. Captain Mulder confirmed that that is an average standard that is used. In fact, the Public Policy Institute, they refer to it on their website as well. They do it in a larger number. They do 241 per 100,000, since they're dealing with such larger numbers. So, but it varies. It varies for city to city. So that it's a matter of do people feel safe as well, and is crime decreasing? I think that we took away, crime went up. It happened in DC, it happened in Oakland. You add, things have gotten, our reports have gotten steadily better, even with just the few additions that we've had. So there are still problems. I think some members of the community mentioned the robberies, the armed robberies in the streets. There's still work to do. So as Dr. Mello says, if you add police, these crimes go down. So we should try. That's why I said incrementally. See, just add and see what happens.
Experiment.
Well, we've been going through an experiment. This was mentioned in the last meeting, and well, it was mentioned. We've been living through an experiment. We've been living through an experiment of let's cut the police and let's add a mishmash of all sorts of different things and see what happens. Well, we're sort of seeing what happens. Crime gets worse. There are guns in the street. People don't feel safe. Businesses don't feel safe. When the chamber did their survey of businesses, the number 2 issue was public safety, and it was real and perceived. And it was also perceived because a lot of people said that they did not feel safe coming to West Hollywood. This is what we survive on. We're a destination city. This is how we pay our bills. We fill our hotels, we fill our bars, our businesses thrive. And if we have a reputation for that, that's a problem. And thank you for reminding me, because it was another question that I asked Dr. Mello. I said to him what I mentioned last time, that we now have a reputation of a city that is soft on crime. I know criminals, they're not stupid people. They pursue these things with data and numbers too, because it's how they put food on their table, like it or not. So I said, I am concerned that this will be a lingering thing that will take years to fix. He wrote me. So he said, if I can find it, a lot of the scholarly evidence points to police presence as the key channel by which police reduce crime and can change pretty quickly if you were to expand the force, end quote. That is a quote from Dr. Mello.
Okay, commissioners.
If I may, I do have an important point in response.
Go ahead, please respond.
I think it's rather interesting that you bring back up now the FBI national averages, because I know that that's what you were working from last time, and it seems like are continuing to work from as well. I want to make sure that we're clear about the actual study itself. I took the time after you had mentioned it to take a look at it, and actually, based on the report, we are overstaffed as compared to national averages. And it's because you failed to consider, and there's a data note in there, that they consider sworn deputies as a broader category than we list up here, 62. And so that it would include all sworn personnel in the city, taking a look through some of the historical data that has been made public previously from the city. And I don't know what this stands at now, but at least in the December 2021 Public Safety Report, where we were listing out the public safety expenditures, in there we had listed that our total reported sworn FTE for the station was actually 99. So that's an extra 39 heads above the 59.7, which compares to the 62 that we're talking about here. So when you summarize that, we're actually looking at 2.8 sworn officers per 1,000 residents in the city of West Hollywood. Now, West Hollywood is unique. We've talked about that before. It can't be compared to any other city, any other contract city, if you will. So I don't know how we can, I just think we need to be a little bit more cognizant about, research and throwing out numbers. I also think we need to be clear about, the staffing levels that we see, and that, perception is one thing, but sometimes reality is different.
Director Rivas, you actually, sorry. There we go. You actually talked about this a little bit in the last meeting, I believe, about the how we benefit from having extra people at our station, because that station covers other unincorporated areas, but all of them are not dedicated to West Hollywood, even though we do have the benefit of them being there. Correct? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, that is correct. And I know there was a question on kind of, how many staff I think that we have, or sworn staff at the station. So I kind of looked at some data. I certainly haven't seen updated information recently within, I'd say, the last year. But the station is budgeted for a little over 175 positions at the West Hollywood Sheriff Station. At the time, when I looked at the data, it looks like at that point, they were hovering around maybe about 140 of those positions being filled. And so, as you mentioned, Commissioner Nickel, what we have on our 575 annual service level is just part of those positions that are assigned, that are dedicated to West Hollywood. But should there be an incident that warrants having to pull additional resources that obviously are available at the station, then you can certainly, and that will certainly happen, for any sort of major types of incidents and calls or emergencies. So there are benefits to that in terms of what we're paying versus what we are provided from the County of Los Angeles Sheriff's Department as a whole.
Great, thank you. So I know that the 575 does not reflect the last 3 officers, but including them, it is 62 sworn officers.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
Commissioner Blau, I'd love to see the information you're talking about as far as that. I know the FBI does break down these things. I'm specifically talking about when they break it down to sworn officers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and reading the user note here, lastly, it should be noted that totals given for sworn officers for any particular agency reflect not only the patrol officers on the street, but also the officers assigned to various other duties, such as those in administrative and investigative positions, and those assigned to special teams, of which are not counted in that 62.
The form I'm looking at, it breaks it down. They break it down as total employment employees, enforcement employees, and total officers. I'm going just by the total officers.
Commissioners, I don't know if we're going to solve this debate this evening.
No.
I know Commissioner Aramian has something that he would like to contribute as well.
Great, thank you, Chair. And thank you, Commissioners. Both of you are making very good, valid points. But I don't think we're here today to come up with a number of how many sworn deputies we need. I think we need the number of deputies that's going to keep our city safe, to be on call just in case we do need to utilize their services. For example, no one's talking about the fire department. What if fires were down? Are we going to get rid of half of our fire department? And God forbid something happens, a fire breaks out, what are we going to do? City's on fire. We got rid of a couple of firefighters from Station 7, Station 8. It doesn't work that way. We need to have a healthy number of both fire personnel, law enforcement personnel, so when something does arise, we all see what's happening in New York right now. The New York City has sent out the National Guard for the problems that's happening in the New York City subway system. And that's New York City. It's a huge city. They have NYPD, and they're reaching out to the National Guard. Luckily, we don't have to figure out how many deputies we need. Let's just make sure that we have the deputies on hand, the 62, whatever number it is, to make sure, God forbid something happens, we are taken care of and we are safe. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Any last points, commissioners? All right, I think we've all had the opportunity to voice our opinions. Director Rivas, from our February meeting, as well as the discussion this evening, do we feel we have our recommendation that we would like to send to council?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, definitely we'll be taking all the input and feedback collectively from both meetings and sharing that information to the council as well as to the city manager's office.
Okay, thank you. So with that being said, commissioners, moving on to item 9, are there any additional staff updates this evening?
Good evening, and thank you, Chair and members of the Commission. The City of West Hollywood was proud to bring back the Public Safety Awards ceremony, which took place here at Council Chambers last Wednesday on March 6th. It was a proud day for the city as we recognized outstanding contributions to public and community safety by members of the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, Los Angeles County Fire Department, and our block-by-block security ambassadors. Thank you to all of our public safety commissioners for your support and participation in this great event, and we look forward to continuing this honored tradition each year. Yesterday, West Hollywood Park was transformed into the home of the Elton John AIDS Foundation annual Oscars party. With months of planning in place, city staff, along with our Los Angeles Sheriff's Department and Los Angeles County Fire Department, ensured a seamless and successful event. There were no significant disruptions or incidents related to the event, which raised record-setting numbers for a very important mission. The city is currently in full gear planning for Pride 2024, which will take place May 31st through June 2nd. We are working with our local business community and the Chamber of Commerce to share information on events, opportunities to participate, and impacts. Lastly, the city is ready and finalizing plans for the LA Marathon, which will take place this Sunday, March 17th. We will be working closely with our sheriffs and fire department to ensure the appropriate street closures and public safety measures are in place for the event. This includes the updates from the Public Safety Division. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Any additional comments, or Director Rivas?
Yes, thank you. I did want to just also let the commission know and members of the community that there will be some planned proposed amendments to our West Hollywood Municipal Code as it relates to vacant properties and the security of other properties. And so I know that was a request, and I know it has been discussed and mentioned by members of the public as well as the commission. And so staff is bringing forth some proposed changes to enhance those security measures. not just on vacant properties, but even at some of our security construction sites as well. There will be an update that's included as a part of that item as well regarding the vacant property program, and so that information will be shared and presented by our Neighborhood and Business Safety Division, which essentially is our code enforcement team, and so they will be providing that information, so I just wanted to make mention of that as well. So that concludes our comments.
Great, thank you. Item 10 is public comments. Commission Secretary, do we have any public comments in chambers?
We don't have any comments in chambers.
Great, thank you. Item 11 is commissioner comments. Commissioners, do we have any comments this evening?
Yes.
Commissioner Ramian?
Good evening, thank you. Just want to share with the community a couple of events I attended within the last month of our last Public Safety Commission meeting. I was able to attend and visit the UCLA outreach medical van that comes to West Hollywood and other cities throughout Los Angeles. I met him at Plummer Park. It was a great opportunity to meet a couple of the outreach workers who come to Plummer Park and, like I mentioned, other areas of Los Angeles, and making contact with the unhoused or people who are seeking medical attention. It is a free service to them, which brings me up to a point that Steve Martin had mentioned. You know, I see the UCLA van more often than I see any of our mental health workers making contact with the unhoused in our community. So I would like to maybe invite our mental health workers to come to a Public Safety Commission meeting and explain to us what their day does look like, and if there is a contact I do make with the unhoused, what services they're offering them. So maybe that is something we could do. Director Rivas?
Not to interrupt you, but you have to make a motion if you want them to attend.
Okay.
So do you care to make a motion?
Could I make a motion to invite our mental health team to come and speak at the Public Safety Commission?
And I second the motion, since you leapfrogged my motion I was going to make. But that's okay, because we each did go, and they do tremendous work. So I would like to see them come and present to us as well.
Public Safety Appreciation Luncheon last week was amazing. I want to thank Anita for doing a great job. It was great to see the members of the community come out. Congratulations to all of our men and women in the Sheriff's Department and the Fire Department who received awards, as well as Block by Block. It was a great event, and looking forward to many more of those events in the upcoming months and years. The other thing I wanted to talk about, you know, I was so happy to see members of the community come to our Public Safety Commission meeting today and speak up. I'm a big advocate of, you know, doing outreach and inviting the community to come to these meetings and speak in regards to public safety of what's going on in their neighborhood and in our city. With that being said, there's another item I'd like to agendize. I would like to see if the commission could also go and do some outreach for our community. I would like to maybe see an open house done on the east side and one on the west side, where we would invite members of the Sheriff's Department, Fire Department, Block by Block, Public Safety Commission would be in attendance, so we could outreach to the community, let them know we are here, what the Public Safety Commission does. They can meet members of the Sheriff's Department, members of Block by Block, and maybe also a couple of members of City Council. Because it is, again, it's one of my biggest passions is getting the word out there of public safety, and I believe that we still have work to do as commissioners. It's not just sitting on the dais and giving our recommendations to City Council, but it also reaching out to the community and informing them of what the Public Safety Commission does. So I would like to agendize that. Hopefully, we could get that on the agenda.
So you're making a motion?
I would like to make a motion to do some sort of an outreach, open house, inviting the community. We could figure out the details of where the event will be. I think it will have to be maybe one on the east side, one on the west side, or city center. Make it accessible to residents and the community. And I'd also like to invite deputies, like I said, block by block, and fire, and also members of City Council.
Okay, great. Commissioners? Anyone like to second? Second. All right. Great. Thank you, Commissioner Ramian.
Chair, so I'm
yes.
sorry, so just, it seems like there's consensus, right, with the commission on those two items, so we can definitely look at adding that item for discussion as it relates to outreach in the community, and then certainly we'll work with Human Services and the department to see the feasibility of having somebody from the care team or even like UCLA Healthcare in Action, maybe some representatives come in at a meeting in the near future to present information to the community and the commission. So
yeah, and
I just want to make sure.
think just to clarify, Director Rivas, yes, we would like to hear from our CARES team, but also UCLA as well.
Understood. Understood. So I will definitely work with the Human Services Department, who's the liaison and manages their contracts, and see what their availability is, and trying to place that on a future agenda.
Okay. Thank you, commissioners.
That is all I have. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. I just want to make a few quick comments. Several of us were at the Public Safety Awards. I want to thank Anita for arranging that, putting it together. Your first event, correct, for the city? So thank you. I thought it was very successful. I knew I was opening, but we were also put to work, which was great because we were able to participate and honor our sheriff's department, our fire department, and our block-by-block security ambassadors. So it was an amazing event. And also this past Saturday, I accompanied Mayor Erickson to Trendsetters, the barbershop at La Brea and Fountain for a ribbon-cutting ceremony. They sadly were shuttered for close to 3 months after their 7th vehicle incident. So it was nice. The mayor was quite instrumental in helping to get the shop open again. They are all independent contractors. They are one of, I believe, 2 black businesses in the city. So I want to thank the mayor for his support. Any other comments? Commissioner Nichols?
Thank you, Chair Hallman. I will also just say that the Public Safety Awards and Luncheon, it was really wonderful. I'm glad we had a chance to honor the people that protect us every day, and staff did an amazing job. It was a really great event. And I actually was wondering, Director Rivas, for the care team, could we start getting a report for that? I know that it's a little, we have to be careful because it's dealing with medical information, which is confidential. I'm not asking about that, but just how many calls they have per month, and sort of if we know where in the city, just basic information.
We'll definitely bring that to the department's attention and see what's feasible to bring back.
Great.
Sure.
And then the last thing I wanted to say is about the cancellation of the book signing by Brett Gelman at Book Soup. I'm sure that they did it for absolute safety reasons. I'm certainly not blaming the business. I am saying that it's unfortunate that they had to do it. I understand some of the threats were violent. I have certainly protested quite a bit in my life against the Iraq War, for gay rights. I support everyone's right to protest, but the moment that it turns into a threat of violence, it's a real problem, and I thought that we were a better city than that. I really hate that happened. That's all for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, commissioners, before we?
I just want to concur with everyone on the awards. It was really great to participate. Couldn't believe how many people we had in the room. It was nice to see everyone, and agree. I'm looking forward to the next one. And I also think what Commissioner Rounian said, I mean, could we combine that, make that a little more public potentially in the future? Might be something we want to think about exploring.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Harrison. With that, I want to thank the commissioners and the public for contributing this evening. Very important discussions. Obviously, there are always many different points of view, but it's important that we have these discussions. And I know our wishes will be well represented to City Council. So with that being said, until our next meeting, which is April 8th here in Chambers at 6 p.m., we are adjourned. Thank you.